Cat Williams, he recently came forward and said the reason why he's been going to Diddy so hard was because he felt that Diddy has something to do with Tupac's death. And Cat really always looked up to Tupac, felt he was a kindred spirit, like really like idolized him when he was younger and so forth.
Yeah.
Do you feel there's any truth at all in Diddy's connection with Tupac's murder?
You know, there's no concrete evidence there, but I wouldn't be surprised. Like if some concrete evidence come out and they point that he definitely has something to do with it, I wouldn't be surprised, because I remember in those times that the way he moved was, he was a very scary individual. And, you know, scary people with money do dangerous things. If they not, you know, if they can't handle it like men, they always look for another way to get rid of someone that they feel is a threat to them. So, you know, no one knows. I think now that, you know, you hear rumors here and there that there's going to be brought up in a trial and things like that. And what's the guy who's in jail now? Keefe D himself said, you know, that he was involved. So I'm trying to see how it's going to play out, but I won't be surprised, to be honest.
I mean, it's a hard thing to prove.
Yeah, that's why I said it's hard to really say, yeah, he has something to do with it when there's no evidence, you know, concrete evidence.
Right. Unlike Keefe, Tupac is not going to write a tell-all book implicating himself in the situation. So then you got to prove that there was phone calls. You got to prove there was money that changed hands. Because essentially it's a murder for hire, which is what like Lil Durk is going through right now.
Yeah, man.
It's you know, with all the witnesses dead and so forth. Because I'd heard that Pac's family was talking to a lawyer, I guess Benjamin Crump, to potentially sue Diddy, but Diddy at this point, I believe, has over 100 lawsuits. So you just got to wait in line.
That's crazy. Like that. That's crazy.
I mean, how do you feel? You know, I remember, it's interesting, right? Because I didn't really think about this before, but Diddy had accepted some sort of award. This is a few years ago. And he basically took a shot at Suge because Suge was in prison. He's like, yeah, here I am, you know, on the video dancing. And he kind of implied, yeah, and look at where Suge is right now.
Whoa.
Right? It was something to that extent.
Yeah.
I'm sure people are going to look this up and find the example. It was. I remember that's how the story, it was basically he had quoted what Suge said on stage, and Suge at the time was in prison, and he's basically living his life and almost a billionaire and so forth. But now in 2024, Diddy's also in prison, potentially looking at more time than Suge Knight.
That's crazy, bro. That's why you have to be humble, and you have to be, I think it's very important to be, you have to be humble, because everyone can be tested. You know, everyone can be trialed. Everyone can be tried. I mean, everyone. So, you know, to say, look where he's at and look where I'm at, and, you know, you ain't squeaky clean yourself, it was kind of like, that's from arrogance. You know, I think when you get to that point where you feel like you're untouchable, you start behaving this way.
Yeah, it's one of the 48 laws of power. That was the one that really, you know, there's a few of those laws that really I internalized deeply, but that was one of them. One of them is, once you win, you stop. You don't spike the ball.
Yeah, that
you don't
do
a touchdown dance. You don't rub their face in it, because you could potentially turn a win into a bigger loss. Because if you continue to aggravate that person after you've already beaten them, you're going to start making them more and more angry to the point where they'll crash out.
Yeah, true. And then
everyone loses.
Yeah, that's why you got to be wise and say, you know what, I got past it. It was, you know, I didn't make, because anybody could have went to prison back in the day. Like, you know, back in the day when we was going through the East Coast, West Coast, you're supposed to just fall back. You know, it's supposed to just fall back.
You know, it's interesting when you say that, the East Coast, West Coast thing, that the one thing that Billy Garland told me that I never really paid attention to before was when Pac was going through the whole East Coast, West Coast beef. Afeni pulled him aside and said, you know, this is the same thing that the Black Panthers went through with COINTELPRO. That COINTELPRO literally, and me and Billy talked about this, and I'd heard about this a lot, that there was East Coast Panthers and there was West Coast Panthers, right? And the government had paid informants that were in the middle of it, and they were taking their mail and mixing it up and so forth. And basically threatening each other and saying, yeah, when I see you, I'm going to kill you. It's on sight and so forth. So by the time that they would beat up, they thought that there was a whole beef going on, which is really orchestrated by the government.
Yes, I heard about that. Yeah.
This is a real thing. This is not conspiracy theory. The papers really came out and people really testified on this on the stand. And Afeni was basically telling Pac, you're going through the same thing we already went through. And according to Billy and so forth, that's when Pac started thinking like, okay, I got to stop this. I'm literally repeating history again and so forth. I mean, was there near the end, was Pac really having conversations about, I got to stop this? You know, I have friends on the East Coast. I know there's the One Nation album and so forth, but was he really trying to like really squash it?
He really was. The reason why he was doing the One Nation album, because he wanted to show that it wasn't an East Coast, West Coast beef. And I heard Pac out of his own mouth, my ears, saying that he don't really want nothing bad to happen to Biggie. He said, I just want to spank him like a little brother. So I don't think Pac really wanted to see Biggie harmed. I think he wanted to prove that it's not an East Coast, West Coast beef. And if they done that to the Black Panthers, who was more, structured than rappers that from the streets, you best believe they had some plants in the hip hop industry and still do. You understand? Like, it's even more easier to, to put some plants in the rappers, because all you gotta do is bring some Hennessy and weed. They're gonna let you in their crew. You know what I mean? This is, the Black Panthers, it was more difficult to breach them. And they did it with these individuals, so of course. And they used to do the same thing to the Bloods and Crips, like back in the day. I know people that say they used to dress up in red and they go do a drive-by in the Crip and vice versa. And they be police doing this.